Let the record show that the board members present are Mr. Bruce, Mrs. Heisel, Mr. Fisher, Mr. Jannon, Dr. Garcia, and Dr. Barksdale. So we do have a forum. Before we start the meeting, I just want to take a moment, in the interim between when we had our ad hoc meeting earlier and coming here, I had a conversation with a close friend of mine who called me from Kerrville. He may have been at a family wedding in California this weekend and came back to find they had no house.
Wow.
So let's just take a moment to remember these very tragic events of this week. All right, do we have anyone signed up to speak?
Yes, sir.
We do not. All right. The minutes are enclosed. If you haven't had a chance to look at those before the meeting, please do so now. We have a motion by Dr. Garcia to approve. Do we have a
Second motion.
Second from Dr. Barksdale. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. All right, the district name change.
Yes, sir, Chair, members of the board. This is something that I had been thinking about since I was appointed to the chief appraiser last year. Basically to follow suit with all the other larger metros. The biggest reason is, just to eliminate any confusion about the perception that we are under a county authority. Section 601C of the Texas Property Tax Code states clearly that appraisal districts throughout the state are a political subdivision of the state. So at this time, I would like to ask the board to formally change our name effective January the 1st, 2026 from Bear Appraisal District to Bear Central Appraisal District. Harris Appraisal District is also known as Harris Central. The Dallas Central Appraisal District, our neighbors up the street on 35, Travis Central Appraisal District. Again, this is to eliminate the confusion. You hear it a lot, Bear County Appraisal District, Bear County Appraisal District. This is basically to reiterate that we are the centralized and impartial role in the property tax system. And we are the appraisal authority for all all taxable property that's located within Bear County while still maintaining our separation. We have been known as BCAT for a long time now, and it's always been the assumption Bear County. By asking the board's approval, we will now be hopefully Bear Central Appraisal District.
Yeah. Do
we need a motion?
Yes, we do.
So moved.
So Mr. Bruce has moved. Approval.
Second.
Second from Dr. Barksdale. Any discussion?
Any costs associated with relabeling and renaming?
Very minimal, sir. I'm glad you brought that up. The biggest cost that we have seen, and Crystal's already gotten some estimates, is the signage in the front. We have gotten, correct me if I'm wrong, estimates ranging from 18,000 all the way to 9,000, and we are looking at probably the $9,000 one. Aside from that, the biggest cost would be any kind of publications. I know that Jennifer is getting her public outreach, her campaign in progress. Anywhere, we were looking at it as an estimate of like when we get ads for notices for the deadline, protest deadline, we're looking anywhere between 15 to 20,000 on the high end. One of the things that I had thought about, and I'm glad that I did this, is postcards. Just to send out a postcard to every property owner, any ID. So Mr. Gannon here, for example, owns 50 properties. He'll only get one postcard, and it has in English and Spanish, basically changing the name from Bear Appraisal District to Bear Central. Now, the associated cost with that, we had an estimate that was sent to us yesterday was $321,000. At this time, I am not asking the board for that. Like I said, I would like to do what we can on our end to minimize that cost. But Mr. Fisher, to your point, the biggest cost that we've seen that we would incur would be the front signage.
I mean, my concern is we live in a data hijacking. And,
Yes, sir.
You know, taxpayers or whatever would be looking at property owners, be looking at. Is this for real? Is this coming from a different entity? Am I being kind of spammed or phished or anything like that? Or, you know,
With board approval, we will be sending out an immediate press release right now. As we get closer to the date in January, we will be sending out a full media release. At which time I will ask any of the reporters that we have good relationships with to run the story, possibly come in for an interview. And so we're gonna do our best to make sure that we communicate that to the public. And that's why one of the things that I wanted to get for y'all would be an estimate, should we mail out, should we choose to mail out, that would be a pretty exorbitant cost.
yeah, as long as there's a plan, as long as we're to
Absolutely.
notify the community that.
The community, the taxing jurisdictions especially, and also to the public.
Perfect.
Thank you, sir.
Anything else? I will say this has been an issue not just with the general public, but with Bear County government itself.
That's correct.
The issues we had trying to figure out how much that election would cost were exacerbated by the fact that the elections administrator thought we would be running the elections with the county.
Right.
Which we were not allowed to do. So I do think there is some value in making sure that people understand we are an independent state agency, not a government.
I think the most important thing that we want to communicate to the public is that the only thing changing is our name. Our statutory requirements are all the same. There will be no disruption to services that they've expected from our office. It is simply the name change. And again, this is to separate ourselves from any perception that we fall under the county jurisdiction.
And the mailer 321, that's to all 740 parcels?
No, ma'am. Actually, that's for 655,000. The 755 in round figures, that's all the properties that we have. But again, we have multiple owners.
Oh,
So
okay.
the 655 would be just one owner getting one notice as opposed to one for each property that they own. Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, board.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Is there any additional conversation? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes. Okay. Item E is update board director meeting dates and times. This arose from a request by Mr. Uresi that our current meeting dates coincide with Commissioner's Court. And it makes it difficult for him to attend on a regular basis. We had talked about moving it back a week, so instead of the second Tuesday of the month, making it the third Tuesday of the month.
Yes, sir, because right now, currently, we have our next meeting scheduled for August 12th. I unfortunately have a scheduling conflict that day. I will be in Dallas attending a TAD meeting. At this time, I'd like to see what dates are available for the board. We could possibly do it the next day on the 13th. That would be a Wednesday. Also, we could move it up to the following Tuesday on the 19th. The problem is, sir, I think your schedule is, you're gonna have a conflict. You won't be here. But at the same time, the vice chair or the secretary could, run the meeting in your absence. I just wanted to give those two options to the board.
Is there anything pressing going on with this?
What I'm planning on doing to present is the budget meeting, where we pass the budget. So we would have to have the public
Do
hearing.
that in September, or is that?
We could, I would rather do it in August, that way we don't push on the September 15th deadline. So if we could do it sooner, the better. And again, we would have to have a public hearing before the actual hearing, so we'd have to have two meetings on that day.
I'm good with either change.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. 13th, that's fine.
You're right, I'm out of town all the week of the 16th, so, or the 17th, so
13th would be
the
better.
13th would be better.
Okay.
August 13th,
All right,
okay? And then the next one would be the November meeting, which we currently have scheduled on Veterans Day.
yes.
Yeah.
So we could do the same thing with board approval. We could move it from November the 11th to the next Wednesday, the 12th. If that's agreeable with the board.
November 12th?
Yes, sir.
Does that work for everybody?
Yes, that's fine with me.
Yes.
All right, then, do we require a motion for this, or,
Believe so.
okay, we have a proposal to move the dates for the September or the August meeting to August 13th and the November meeting to November 12th. So moved. Been moved by Dr. Barksdale, second,
I'll second.
second from Ms. Heisel. Any additional comments?
Is that an evening meeting on November 12th?
That would be an afternoon.
Yes.
Right.
September and December will be the evening, ma'am.
Yes.
Okay. All right, we have a motion and second. All those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? The motion passes. All right. Legislative update. It should be exciting.
At the last meeting, the board has asked me to give the final legislative update, after the governor has had time to either sign the bills or veto them. At this time, I just want to give you a quick recap. House Bill 9, Senate Bill 4, and Senate Bill 23 are all the exemption bills that were all signed by the governor on the 12th of June. Now, those will require voter approval on November 4th. Ms. Heisel, if you remember, ma'am, the last meeting, HB 9 is the one that increases the BPP exemption from currently it's 2,500 to 125,000. You had asked for data. I provided the board on the next page that currently right now, as we sit, we have 45,083 business personal property accounts. So if you want to ask the breakdown, we have 10,272 accounts that would still require a rendition to be filed, that are over 125,000. We would in turn be exempting 34,811 building personal property accounts, which is a huge number. But if you look at further on to the right, the market value, those 34,000 plus accounts represents 848 million. The 10,200 accounts that would still be taxable is still $21.5 billion in value. So that is I hope that's the information that you asked for, ma'am, the breakdown.
So the taxing entities are only losing 4%.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Moving on to the other bills, again, House Bill 148, which was the board training. The two reappraisal plan bills, 2786 and Senate Bill 2538 did not pass. The one that also I wanted to bring to the board's attention, Senate Bill 1173. This is the one that increases the threshold required for competitive bidding right now from 50,000 to 100,000. That one was signed by the governor. At the last meeting, Mr. Sahanowicz had asked for information as far as how many contracts we currently have. I provided that information also right now. So with the current threshold of 50,000, the district has 112 total contracts, 96 of which are under that $50,000 threshold. So we only come to the board for board approval on 16 of those. With the increase and the passage of Senate Bill 1173, that number would go from 96 to 104, no longer needing approval, and only 8 contracts in the future needing approval. So at this time, I'd like to ask the board if you would like to put an agenda item in the August meeting to increase that threshold or leave it as is.
Leave it as is.
I would be inclined to leave it as it is.
At the 50?
I think the board needs to see the contract.
Absolutely. I just want to bring it to you on that way we can make sure that if y'all wanted it, we can put it on the agenda.
Yeah.
Okay. Unless y'all have any specific questions, like I said, I know that we went over the ledge update last time.
So the one I just want to highlight and make sure I understood that they did pass the resolution or the legislation that at this point, they reverse the process where now if we don't hear from a taxing entity within 60 days.
That's correct.
It's a yes.
That's correct. That was Senate Bill 2073.
Okay.
Correct.
So what that means is that under the old legislation, the taxing entities actually had to acknowledge
By 2/3 majority,
By
yes.
2/3
And by
majority.
not acknowledging, that was a no.
no, seemed to be a no vote. Now, if they do not acknowledge it, it's presumed to be a yes vote.
Correct.
That will make our lives a little bit easier. But yeah, I just want to make sure.
Yes, sir.
I understood that correctly. Okay.
Did you ever pick up the quiet little piece of legislation that kind of slipped in having to do with board members and.
Yes, sir. Thank you for bringing that up. That is the only bill from the last ledge update that I had presented to the board that was actually vetoed by the governor.
He vetoed it?
Yes, sir. Senate Bill 974, which at the time, the last meeting, would have allowed teachers to serve on the appraisal review
Oh,
board.
no, this is a different,
Oh, which one are you talking about, sir?
this is a different, it arose from school board members, is where it originated from. Not being able to get information from the school districts regarding their budgeting, how they were budgeting. In other words, they were being denied access to information. And they passed a public law that all board members of any public board anywhere shall not be denied access to whatever they want. And if necessary, they'll sign a non-disclosure agreement if it's sensitive material.
That was never part of our talk, sir. I can.
I know,
look into that if you'd like.
they were very quiet about it, because they didn't want much of
What's the
it.
number?
I don't know, 11 something, they didn't want much of opposition to it, but it did pass.
No, I was not aware of that one, sir. Like I said, the only one that at this time that I know for certain that was not signed, that was vetoed, was the one that would have allowed teachers to serve on the ARB.
Yeah, that,
There's a lot of jurisdictions, a lot of appraisal districts that are having a hard time finding appraisal board members, review board members.
right,
And being that the majority of the hearings are done during the summer, you know, the fact that, you know, teachers would have been able to serve. I think the reasoning behind that was, since teachers work for school districts, that it would be perceived as a conflict of interest as them, you know, hearings that were being in effect.
Yeah.
Impacting their taxing
yeah,
jurisdiction.
just so you'll know, the historical behind the other piece that I mentioned really was born with an issue with school boards.
Mm.
It wasn't an issue with appraisal boards, but it wound up being applied to all boards
Yes, sir.
of a public, entity, public sector.
May I suggest you let Roy know which,
Well, the middle, oh, yeah, I've got, it's in my email
Sure,
history. It's
sure.
just, oh, yeah. There was a lot of stuff to try to keep up with.
Going back to 2073, is there communication from this organization to the taxing units regarding that, or is that?
Not yet. I could, if you like, I could, you know, send out are you asking if we have done anything?
Yeah, are the taxing units, have you communicated with the taxing units regarding this?
Not yet.
They're aware.
Not yet. I could send them a notice letting them know that might not be a bad idea.
Yeah, probably.
Okay. Just to let them know that the,
It's changed. The process is, in essence, changed.
okay, absolutely.
I mean, you'd
Because
like
the-
to think that their own legislative
You would,
people would.
yes,
Yes.
exactly, exactly.
But
They
it
have a
would be
much
good on
broader
our part too,
array.
just transparency.
They have a much broader array of things that they have to take into consideration as we do. All right. Any other questions relating to the legislative update? I would like to note for the record that, Member Sahanowitz has now joined us for the rest of the meeting. All right, at this point, we are going to go into closed session. Okay, the board will reconvene from closed session to open session at 2:25. There's nothing to report as a result of the closed session. All right, we are on to our reports. Donna, who we got?
I'm gonna read the funds investment report.
Oh, I'm sorry, Crystal.
Okay, under H, tab 1. It's the funds investment report for May 31st, 2025. Year-to-date interest earned. Total deposits are $12,409,636.56. Year-to-date interest earned is $127,926.46. We are over collateralized by $5,257,339. You turn to page 4. You'll see our year-to-date after on May 31st, revenues collected are $14,297,853. And if you turn to page 7, you'll see we have a surplus as of May 31st of $3,385,328. If you turn to our next page, it's our statement of designated cash funds, our general restricted funds page, and there are no changes. Do you have any questions?
So this was after we paid the elections department?
I'm not sure if the election was paid, but it was in this month or in June.
Are we,
Cents line item.
there's no speculation allowed the fact you can just do bank CDs, right?
We do a money market account,
Money
a
markets.
sweep account, yes.
Okay, are we allowed to do higher rate of return accounts? Is that
Based on we have that funds investment policy, so we follow those guidelines and we don't do high end. We don't have a lot.
like 90-day CD at 4%, example?
We're doing pretty good on our sweep account. We're making about, let's see, on this one alone. The year to date's 127,000, so we're doing about 20,000 or more a month.
Do you know what the rate of return is though?
On that one, it's a little, right here, I think we have it at 2.59.
Is it possible to investigate 90-day CDs? So if they can pay four and a quarter these days, that's so
Yeah,
We can always look into it if the funds, our funds investment policy allows for it. And yes, Ms. Heisel, that was paid out of the election account. On page 6. You'll see under the current month, we paid $381,346. So that was paid out of that one.
Okay, so we're done paying that and we're still over 3 million?
And the election reserve account. And our surplus account, is that what you're referencing? Yes, we still have a surplus of 3 million as of May 31st.
Now, we've made deposits for future elections that are encumbered funds.
Yes, we have $625,415 in our general restricted election fund account.
Okay.
For
For the
future.
26th election.
We've been funding that as we go, and the presumption, which based on our past experience with the elections department, a little slow, but the presumption is that it will be less expensive since we will be on a much broader ballot.
And that restriction is where on which page?
It's on page 8.
In the restricted funds.
It's the second one down. I know it's a little small.
Okay, so that's for the election. fund.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So dumb question, so that is restricted out of the surplus,
That's money we've income, yes, over time.
so that 625 comes out of that 3,385.
It's no, that's the surplus out of this budget.
Okay.
Those are money that we've encumbered or
We've already
set it,
encumbered it.
it's set it
So
aside,
it's
it's separate, yes.
Okay.
Remind me, do we have 1 or 2 seats? up in the 26
1 or 2, what's your?
seats. Elections.
Sure.
Three, isn't it?
I thought it was three.
The three
Did you
seats?
read that?
All three?
Okay, but we have three, but they changed it. We've predetermined which ones have the shorter term.
That would be for the appointed.
Yeah,
Okay.
correct.
Yes, sir.
That's gonna be this November
No, sir, November of 26.
26th.
Yes, sir.
All right. Any
That's
other
gonna be
questions?
at large, just like the
Mhm.
River Authority. and
Correct.
CPS.
All right, any other questions for Ms. Crystal?
We don't have any issues with, do people complain about the fact that we've got a really fund of what's the, that we have a surplus and, you know.
The surplus that we ever have, I mean, every year.
I know, but is there anyone out there criticizing us for that? I'm just curious.
I'm sure we're
There should-
criticized for everything, but
Pardon?
Says he's sure we're criticized for just about
for
everything.
just about everything, but as far as, you know, the taxing jurisdictions, like I said, we're very, very conscientious of the fact that we are, we've talked about this, our budgets are never, you know, wants, they're needs. So we're very conscientious of not that just what we buy, but also what we spend. So as far as having anybody question it, to me, they haven't been, you know, I haven't been.
No, I mean, no, it's a good thing. They
Yeah,
should,
of course.
they should hang a gold star, yeah.
At the end of the budget here, we return the surplus funds.
Whatever's not encumbered that we don't ask the board for, we return to the jurisdiction.
Right.
Yes, sir.
So,
So.
good.
Yeah. And we-
I think everybody benefits from this because in unusual circumstances, for example, like in covered them, we're not having to go back to the taxing entity.
Correct.
For additional money that would impact the budgets that they've already passed.
And we have a long established history of returning to the jurisdictions. I think for the last at least 15 years, we've given back, you know, whatever has not been encumbered.
And if there came a time when you needed to do one of these software upgrades, for example, that you're talking about that's so expensive, would that, could that funding come from the surplus or would that come from a different?
It could, but we also have a designated reserve for that also. So we have set aside, we're currently setting aside money. I told you, Paul has let me know of what we're gonna have to upgrade in 2027. We have some money set aside in a reserve. We also have some money set aside in this budget. And we'll be planning for 2027 also to make sure that we have enough to to pay for that with those funds and not have to encumber a big portion of that. We should be able, we're pretty good shape planning ahead.
So part of the budgeting process is to look at all the fixed assets that we have and what their lifespans are, and then be aware of what the timelines for replacement or upgrade. For some of the software, it's an upgrade now.
Yes.
Replacement, that we plan on that and we designate those funds and encumber them so that it's original, they're there. And we don't have to take them out of those normal budgetary funds.
Yeah, when the AI bomb is.
So page 8 is what you've encumbered, so this is exempt from sending back to the tax authorities. So you have a digital. I can't see it. You have a digital fund and then you have a technology reserve.
You know, for the photography, man, those are for the aerials for our GIS mapping.
Perfect.
We have the litigation expenses reserve, we have the building capital, the retirement funding, the technology reserve, which is what we're talking about, Mr. Bruce. The building upgrades, the roof reserve, the homestead exemption audit. And then we also have the coal retention. These are all designated, you know, reserves that the board has.
All right, any other questions? All right. Now you're up.
Okay, Chief Appraiser's report, we are in tab H2. The first presentation here is of the appraisal roll correction report for the second quarter of the 2025 tax year as authorized by section 2525B. For this quarter, we only have one account to report. It does look like multiple, but it's due to a divided ownership. This individual came to us through our outreach events, and we became aware of their situation in which they were having trouble with ownership through probate and having to get some corrections on their account. They brought it to our attention. We were able to correct it through a meeting. And that is the account for the quarterly report. Any questions on that? If not, we'll be moving on to the tax calendar. At this stage of the appraisal calendar, the certification of the appraisal roll is a central focus of the district right now. We're actively working towards the shared goal of delivering a timely and accurate certified roll. This goes in line with our requirement of 2601, in which the chief appraiser must certify the appraisal roll by July 25th. As part of that, additionally, under section 4112, the appraisal review board must complete substantially all hearings and approve the appraisal records by July 20. Lies the 90 and 90% value achievement that we're looking for. As of the report itself, we were at roughly 89% of the value being certified. As of today, we've crossed that 90% threshold. So we can confidently say that we will be able to certify our appraisal roll with at least 90%. We still have another week and a half to process, and we hope to achieve that 95% certification goal. But we are confident we will be able to certify our records timely.
So remind me what the appraisal roll was. We sent in your original value amount.
Figures 328 billion. 328, and I can get you an exact amount, but yes, off the top of my head, 328.
So you've got 90% of that.
Yes. As of
Do we
today.
know what that 90% value is now?
Let's see. We have completed 112 billion of protested value. I know that. Off the top of my head, what does that leave?
We have about 30 billion that's under appeal. Everything else is resolved.
30
How much under appeal?
About 30 billion,
30 million.
yeah, in round figures.
So just on
percent is that of the total?
It's about 10% of the total.
10%.
It's a little under.
Now,
A lot of
that's on the
stuff.
value side. On the account level side, we still have a ways to go. We still have lots of accounts to process. Today, we've resolved about 100,000 of the protests, but we still have about 85,000 more protests to resolve.
Majority of those residential.
But yes, predominantly it's residential and predominantly on the agent side. And we've worked through the majority of the owner.
Is the, are they gonna hit the 3.5% revenues cap for the city this year?
We don't know, sir.
Don't
Like
know
I said,
yet.
that would be a jurisdictional question. But I do want to thank the board for the support that y'all have given us, because as far as hiring additional staff, you know, every year I send an email to staff today letting them know that we had crossed over that we had eclipsed the 90% threshold. And every year poses new challenges as far as getting to certification. I mean, that is our requirement, my requirement as a chief appraiser. And to do it year over year is not something that we take lightly. We've done it this year with a lot newer staff, you know, also not just appraisal level, you know, but also on the support staff and customer service. So I'd like to commend our executive team, our directors for banding together. We talked about 3 T's: transparency, trust, and teamwork. You know, if we're transparent with our staff, we build the trust. And then after building the trust, the teamwork takes care of itself. And that's something that we pride ourselves on. And today is an example of that, because one of the things that we told them is, yes, we are at 90%, but we can certify on time. As you can see, we're still working. But we're telling them, let's shoot for that 95%. You know, we owe it to our jurisdictions to get as close as we can. And the ad hoc building committee, we had, you know, discussions earlier about our staff. And they bought into the concept of, this is nothing personal. This is just a look at data, what information we have, what information you have. And, you know, I have to commend our commercial department, because they deal with fewer accounts, but much larger value. You know, in our residential, that's where you're talking about the homeowner. That's where it gets personal. That's where you start having hard conversations about data. And again, we talked about AI. Well, AI is not going to have that empathy and the compassion to listen to you and try to negotiate something that we can come to, you know, in the meeting of the minds, or meeting in the middle. So we take pride in not only certifying on time, but doing that while providing excellent customer service. So it wouldn't be possible without the board's continued support. So thank you.
Well, good work.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Any further questions? Nobody wants-
Community engagement.
Okay. Community engagement. Back to you.
Here you go.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. In my report, as the usual, the first page is our monthly statistics for the month of June. You will notice that the number of in-person customers, the number of customers over the phone that we interact with has decreased. Of course, the bulk of our interactions come during the protest season, April, when the notices are distributed, and then up until that May 15th deadline. But one thing that I would like to point to your attention with both our at counter and on the phone interactions with people, we're maintaining that same average length of service. So we're taking the time to talk to the property owners, whether they're in person, whether they're on the phone. We're maintaining that consistent level of customer service that we've become very proud of. So I want to give kudos to our customer information and assistance staff for that. Also, our community engagement events have slowed down drastically. Again, the bulk of that is April and May, but we do make ourselves available to the community throughout the year. So there were 2 events that we attended in June. I'll continue to bring those to you as they arise. We have a lot of invitations already set up for the fall. And otherwise, that is all I have, unless you have questions. Great, thank you very much.
Thank you, Beth.
All right, Mr. George.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I've just got 2 things for the ARB or from the ARB. Coming up in October, we're starting to put together a 15 county ARB conference that we're going to organize to talk about lessons learned, what are the other ARBs doing, what are we doing. We're looking at doing that in late October. And beyond that, just to give you the numbers of where we stand at this point is over the past 5 weeks, we had approximately 46,000 protests that were originally scheduled, of which 48% were handled by the district, the appraisers, before you even got to us as informals. The 24,000 that remained, 15% were no-shows, 10% ended up as non-jurisdictions, and the remaining 7,300 ended up with board orders. And that's where we're at, sir.
Okay, would you run those first numbers by again, the 46
We started at 46,000 protests.
in 1 week?
Well, for the past 5 weeks.
So the past 5 weeks.
Of which 48% were handled as informals by the district. The remaining 24,000 came as to be worked. Of those, 15% were no-shows because they didn't show up. 10% were non-jurisdictions, and the remainder, about 7,300 that ended up turning into hearings, got board orders.
And the 15% that were no-shows, do you know if those were representative accounts or actual owners of the property not showing up, if you know?
41% were agents that didn't show up.
Okay. Agents need to be fined $100 for no showing. No, I'm serious. We need to do this. This needs to stop. Because I know, thank you. I know you can quantify how much it costs you to book a protest. And if they're gonna have you booking protests and the number's gonna be that big and they're gonna no-show, we're talking serious office time lost.
Well,
They're an agent, they're a professional. This is Betancourt's group, and there's no excuse for them not showing up if they're gonna book a contest. What are they out there for? I don't know.
I would just wonder if that's even allowed in code.
Well, I'm saying, I don't know if it's allowed or not, but we sure need to.
Mr. George and I were talking about this earlier, and I think, it's gonna require some sort of legislative
Okay.
measures.
Well, there's
And
another
we were
project.
talking about the fact that I think through CAD, we need to organize the larger county populations, appraisal districts into a coalition to really start lobbying the legislature, because
Yeah.
this is.
Well, you gave us some of those no-show numbers the last meeting. I was astonished.
And I think the
That's
thing,
just not right. That's not right.
I think the thing that, there's 2 aspects to it. One, it's highly inefficient for us. We're paying ARP people to be there to do this and it's not getting done. But the other is if there's a no-show by an agent, that just wipes out the homeowner's ability to appeal, correct? unless they can show some substantive reason, like they were in the hospital or whatever. And so it's not only dysfunctional for us, but it's really a disservice to the people in the community. And I think, we've got 2 years, well, a year and a half for the next legislature. I think this has to be a priority for the larger counties and TAD to really get out there and let all the legislatures know that this is an extremely dysfunctional
What happened to
system.
the person or entity they were representing? What?
I recall in the last meeting, or maybe it was the meeting before, that we had asked for data over the last maybe 2 or 3 years.
As far as
of
no
who
show,
didn't show. I thought we had,
And
you did, ma'am, I apologize.
no,
But you reminded me of that.
so maybe that on the next agenda, we have that for the appraisal review board report.
So just for my clarification, at least let's just say 3 years, 5 years of the last. Just overall, any protest that was done that was a no-show, and then have a breakdown between agent representative and proper, yes, ma'am. And again, I apologize because when you said that, I do remember.
We
you-
all forgot.
I know Mr. George told me they are collecting that data, so it entails us.
When we
that-
heard it recently from Mr. George,
Yeah.
but just historically,
I really think this is something that we have to organize on or nothing's gonna happen.
well, maybe at that county ARB conference. Maybe we piggyback on that. Are we hosting that?
As it stands now, we are.
Maybe we piggyback on that with the larger districts and invite them. Their boards.
Should we go to them? Education, informative, learning experience.
Okay, so when that's organized and we have a timeline, we let the board know what that is.
Sorry, sir.
When you've got that organized and you have a schedule of meetings, please let the board know when those occur. When it is. It's a serious issue.
No, it's tough, it's hard to say if you're gonna do it to an agent, you should do it to an individual, but. In a way, if an individual show up, it's a mixed blessing because it lightens their load that day. They're probably running behind anyway, even though they do everything they can not to run behind. Ultimately, you're gonna run behind. But an agent they have told their client that they're protesting their behalf, and then they're no showing. That's not,
It's essentially disenfranchising their clients. It's ridiculous. Okay.
I do wanna, can I give kudos really fast because I saw a post on Nextdoor about somebody not being able to get through. They were on hold for their informal protest and they called at like 10:15. It was 10:45. They were still on hold, but then they were panicking because they're like, what happens? It was scheduled. And everybody kind of went and actually stood up for the Bexar Appraisal District. And
Wow.
they're like, they're gonna call you back. And I went to go look for it because it was like, well, I wonder like if I should let someone know. And so no, sure enough, like people are like, no, they usually call you back. And then even one of them says they're nicer when they call you back. Okay, so anyway, so I think people are now hoping that they don't get called.
So it turns out guilt is a motive.
Yeah, I guess so. Anyway, but I just wanted to say kudos, because I don't think I have ever seen that before. It's always like people will pile on, and so, but they were like almost in defense, and so just kudos.
I sincerely appreciate you taking the time to acknowledge that, ma'am, because we had a conversation earlier that we take that so seriously, and take the agents out of the equation. So if a property owner files a protest and they miss their informal, if they call us up and say, hey, look, I have a hearing with the ARB next week, but I missed my informal, we're gonna give them that formal hearing, the informal. We're gonna try to resolve it, we try to take off as much from Mr. George's plate as we can. So thank you for saying that, because I think this is his first year as ARB chair, and he's done a great job as far as coordinating. He's got 15 more members that he has to coordinate with the panels. I told him, I said, I can't get involved in his business, but I can do it in our business. So we work very well together as far as getting the process through. So hearing something like that from you, ma'am, really, really means a lot, because again, what we talked about is we completely understand the perception that we have as the bad guy. And all we are is one part of the property tax process. We have no interest in anybody paying more than their fair share. More importantly, we just want to make sure that we have a number right. And when I say number, I mean the value. So that kind of feedback from the property that's unsolicited, and please feel free to share that with me so I can send it to staff. Please.
Comments and like people were like, I got $4,000 dropped. Somebody said, I got 30,000. And I was like, whoa, like, and so, but it was again, I'm still positive. And then I was looking for like, well, where can we improve it?
I will say the ad hoc building committee toured the facility today and saw our equivalent of the mission control room. with
Yes.
All of the videos of the things and the schedule up there.
That's very.
You,
impressive.
you hear all these numbers and then see what it actually entails in terms of, actually executing on that. It was very impressive. Kudos.
And that is a total team effort because I'm so proud to say that the majority of the executive team that I have, that I have the pleasure and honor of working with came through the ranks with me. We remember what it was like 20-some years ago. We remember those difficult conversations, those confrontations where there's no need for that. You know, so when you take the personal aspect out of it, and let's just talk facts, let's talk data. But at the same time, having that one-on-one, that back and forth, that's gone so, it's created such a goodwill with the public that to hear that, to have, you know, somebody, especially a board member here, hey, look, this is what they said about y'all. That's just wonderful. That's good, solidifies the fact that yes, we are doing what we're supposed to be doing.
I was really afraid someone had put my address on there.
With social media too.
Yes.
Yes, which is not known as a kindness forum.
No, so thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that was our last report, so the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Was it Ms. Heisel? Second, Brad. That's Barksdale, all in favor? Any opposed? The meeting will close at 2:52 p.m.